Welcome everybody, Dr. Ray, and today what we're going to be talking about is what you can do as a student to be successful at college. I'm going to give you tips for being successful. I was in college for 10 years. I went for a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and then after working, back for a doctorate degree. And I've also been a professor for the last 14 years at multiple different universities. And I've taught face-to-face, I've taken face-to-face, I've taught face-to-face, I've taken online, and I've taught online. I've also taught hybrid and taken hybrid classes. And my goal as a faculty member is to actually teach people how to design courses. So I'm going to tell you how to be successful in your classes, what to do, tips that I've learned, things that made me successful, and things that I see the most successful students doing. So I'm going to give you some tips. I did have to write them all down, so I'm going to be looking down at my notes here just every second just to kind of make sure that I'm not missing anything important for you. All right. So how to do well in college. And this is at any level, bachelor's, master's, Ph.D. All right. First thing, and this is pretty obvious, you got to go to class. Show up for class. Don't skip any classes. And for those of you who are online, that means actually going into the online class at least 2 to 3 times per week to checking on things like discussion boards, making sure you're not missing anything, making sure you're not missing any notes from your instructor that are posted in the course. And for those of you who just have face-to-face courses, just go to class. It's pretty easy. It's very difficult to do well in a class if you don't go. So tip number 1, go to class. I realize some of these are really common sense, like no kidding. And some of them are not going to be. So make sure you pay attention to all of them. So the first one, go to class. All right. Second thing, buy a notebook, some kind of notebook, like a binder with paper in it for every one of your courses. You should have a binder with paper in it for all your classes. Literally, I learned this about halfway through college and realized how much it helped me. Have a binder with paper in it for all your classes. That's to take notes, write down things, and take all the handouts that you get. Now, for a face-to-face class, you might get more handouts. You might be taking notes during class. For an online class, everything's going to be online. Print it out. Print it out, put it in that notebook so that you have it. If you want to make an online folder like Dropbox or OneDrive or Google Drive or whatever, and copy everything from your online class and just put it in the folder, do that. But make sure you have something that's holding all of your work for that class. And the reason you do that is because when you work on projects or you're studying for tests in that class, everything's organized, it's all together. And I'll tell you what, I've used, especially as you progress through a major, had to go back through my old notebooks, and it's so easy when they're right there. Sometimes I had to dig through stacks of paper because it just wasn't organized well enough to find what I was looking for from something like 3 classes ago. That's applicable to the current class that I'm taking. Make sure you save and have all those notebooks. Super important. All right, next thing. Literally read all the readings. Read all the readings in the class. Helps you so much. There's a reason that we give readings. I don't give readings because I think it'd be fun for the students to do extra work. It's not like someone's telling me no one's telling me how to design my class. No one's telling a professor how to design their class. They can design it however they want to. So please make sure that you read all the readings. The reason why, usually if I'm teaching face-to-face or online, I give some kind of lecture or content or activity or whatever based on a topic. And then what I do is I give students a reading on the topic that goes into more depth. Now, in a project-based course, that might not be as important, but in a course where there's tests, I've had college classes where some of the tests were all based on some of those extra readings that other people weren't doing. Or sometimes I didn't understand a concept well enough that the instructor was covering, just because maybe I wasn't paying attention, maybe the instructor didn't cover it enough, or for whatever reason, my brain wasn't processing it well enough. Those extra supplemental readings were designed to help me get a better understanding of it. If I needed to go further, I could go on the internet. The issue with that is just searching yourself, is you might not always be finding the best sources for things. So it's great when your instructor's already done that for you. Don't reinvent the wheel. They've already done it. They found you good sources. So use those. because you might not be able to tell the difference between good and bad sources. You don't want to have some misinformation and go and try to take a test or do an assignment and write the wrong things down, right? So literally read all the readings. Now, if you're assigned like 10 readings in 1 week, you might do the old college skim on some of them, or even better yet, send an email to the professor and say, hey, you gave us 300 pages to read this week. That's impossible. What are the key things that you really want me to focus on for this week? And do that. That's if you get a lot of them. Just a tip. All right. Next thing. And this is right along with this. Okay, so first of all, take notes. Take notes in class. Take notes online. The reason that you do this is there's all kinds of little tips. So, and let me tell you, there's two kinds of classes. There's classes that give tests and classes that don't give tests. The classes that don't give tests all have projects. And you're like, well, why would I take notes in there? And I'm going to tell you exactly why. So take good notes. So first of all, if you're in a class with a test, where the teacher's given tests, you have to take really good notes while you're in the class. And you probably need to find out, or hopefully know, if that professor is giving you all their test questions are coming from those notes. You got to be like a machine writing down notes. I know it's kind of a pain. I've done it a bunch, I've typed them, and I've done it by hand, but you really have to do it. Being able to go back and read clear notes and knowing how to organize your notes and making them nice as you went through, super, super, super helpful. Now, if you're like, well, hey, my class doesn't have any tests, what do I need to take notes for in here? It's not even worth it. Let me tell you what. Some super important, key things that I've learned in my classes, or just from a professor, or even a student asking a great question and someone casually mentioning something. And me in class saying, that seems kind of vital and kind of important. I'm going to take a note of that. I can't tell you how many times I've had to go back through my notes that I remember someone said something like several years ago or several months ago, and been able to go through, pick out that one note and say, thank you that I wrote this down. Even if it was like a note for myself about a source to look up. So glad that I wrote it down. So please, please, please take notes. If you're in a class with tests, you have no choice. If you're in a class without tests, you can be a little more selective, but still take notes. That's why I say get that binder, take those notes. All right. And to go along with tests, if you are in a class with tests, learn how to actually study for the test. So what does that mean? That means finding all you can out about the test. Where does the professor get their test questions from? Maybe it's from everything. Maybe it's just from lectures. Maybe it's just from tests. I had a professor in an undergraduate business course that I took when I was an undergrad, and all their test questions were from the bolded keywords in the chapter. So you've got to kind of find out what the test is from. And that matters with talking with the students, talking with the professor. And I'm going to kind of get to some of those in a couple minutes. But finding out where the test questions come from and making sure that you practice good study habits. What does that mean? That usually doesn't mean studying the night before. However, I will say that I've encountered students who can literally look at something one time, like 3 pages of notes, and pretty much memorize it and do very well on a test. If you're one of those people, you are so lucky. You're really lucky, and you really bother me because I do not have the skill that you do. And that's awesome. But I think most people do not have that skill. I have seen people just be able to read like 3 to 5 pages and take tests and get 100, do perfectly well. They have a great visual memory. I shouldn't say visual, but they have a great way to memorize what they just saw and store it. Now, for the rest of us who are more normal, we probably need to start studying a week to a couple days before that test, making sure that we fully understand all the concepts the teacher is going to cover, instructor is going to cover, and making sure that we're prepared. Well, how do you prepare for a test? What should you do? So a couple things. Usually what you're trying to do when you're trying to remember things for a test is something called self-regulation or metacognition. You're trying to learn that material, trying to tell your brain, I need to remember this. So what are some ways to do that? There are a bunch of different ways. One of my and there are so many different ways to remember it. One of my most favorite strategies that is backed up by research, that I have actually done research on, and probably my most favorite way to remember things when I'm trying to remember things for a test is to do something called think alouds. And basically what a think aloud is that I will read a piece from my notes or from the chapter, and I will ask myself, what did I just read? Why is it important? And how does it connect to what we're doing in the class? Now, I might need to memorize it, but even doing that think aloud exercise helps me to remember. So utilize strategies that help you to study. Very, very, very important. All right, next thing. Be active in class, ask questions. So what we're trying to do here is several things. First of all, I'm trying to get you to learn. If you're in the class asking questions, you can learn. You're picking up on things that maybe you don't understand. So you're getting the instructor to explain the things you don't understand, but you're doing two other things. One, you're getting students in the class to recognize you, and you're becoming known, which is actually a really good thing. It also might encourage other students to ask questions if they're not. The other thing that it's doing is the instructor is now recognizing your name. Every time the instructor sees your name, recognizes your name, it becomes a little harder for them to give you a bad grade. Let me give you an example. If I had to tell you to fire someone from work, from your job, if I told you to fire someone, how easy is it to fire John or Jane Doe that you don't know versus firing someone in your family or one of your friends or your neighbor? It's a lot harder to fire someone you don't know, right? It's a lot easier to just fire the random person you don't know, right? You don't really care. But if it's your neighbor, you're like, oh my goodness, wow. And let me give you another example. Well, I don't need, that's enough of the examples for that. I could keep giving you examples on that all day. But the point of this is that if you become known to that professor and they start to know who you are, it becomes a lot more difficult for them to give you a bad grade. Now, if you're just taking tests and it's a very objective grade, there's not much they can do, but maybe you can even talk them into extra work or something like that. But especially when it's like a subjective, like essays or projects, it becomes a lot more challenging for them to give you a bad grade. Now, I'm not going to say professors are going to sway your grade. I'm just saying that there's something inside people that when they know someone, it becomes a lot harder to give them that bad grade versus someone they know. So I would encourage you to make yourself well known in the class. Also, professors like to, if they know that you're a student that's trying and working really hard, they're going to even if they don't want to be, they're going to be a little more biased towards you. So please, please do that. And that leads to two other things. That is, one, talking to other students in the class who are taking it with you to find out if you're missing anything key or important that you are just missed, didn't pay attention to, whatever. And you can do all this online. So you participate online, talk to your professor online. Next thing to go along with talking to those students is going and talking to your professor one-on-one. Talk to your professor during office hours. 100% great way to help you. As I said, they getting to know you helps them, it becomes harder for them to grade you more harshly. Go visit them during office hours, 100%. Even if it's online and you're going to do a quick Zoom, or if they don't have office hours or whatever, just schedule a quick 15-minute meeting with the professor. Face with name, get to know them. Once you become a human to them and not just another student in their class, it's more challenging for them to give you a bad grade. So just a little tip. All right, and my final thing. And this specifically goes to project-based classes, but I'll give you some tips for tests too. While you're working on your project, let's say you're working on an essay or a project or a paper for a professor, send it to him before it's due. Send it to him before it's due when it's pretty done and say, what do you think? What do I need to do to improve this? They will tell you exactly what you need to do to get the A, right there. If you're in any kind of project-based class and you take the initiative to get the project done a couple days ahead of time, you send it to the professor or even a week ahead of time, and you say, I just want some quick feedback. Can you just quickly take a look at this and tell me what I need to do to get an A? They may say, hey, this is great, you're good, don't worry about it. Or they may say, I want you to do X, Y, Z, but you've taken that initiative, now the ball's in their court. And if it's a test and you go in during office hours and say, I need some help studying for this, they're going to give you some of the tips for questions. They may actually give you the answers for some of the questions. So always take advantage of those office hours and always make sure that you go in or talk to them or give them something before the assignments due. For tests, go talk to them. For assignments, give it to them early and get some feedback. If you do all of those things, college is not difficult. College is not hard. What college is it's hard to find, it's not hard like hard to learn things. What it's hard is it's hard to manage yourself and perform well and actually show that to the professors. I personally think if you follow these strategies that I've just given you, you're going to excel and do really well in most majors, most classes, most degree programs. You're going to do pretty well. I mean, if you did all the stuff that I told you, that just means you're trying. And people who try, motivation is one of the biggest things that spells out success in most degree programs. So if you just have that motivation, you're showing that initiative, you're going to probably do well. Let me run down my list really quick just to kind of remind everyone my tips for being successful in college. Go to class, don't skip it. If you're online, log in 2 to 3 times per week. Have a notebook or even a folder online for every class that you can make notes in. Take pictures of all the readings or whatever you have to do to make sure you have a copy of it for your records that you can keep forever if you ever need to go back to it or to utilize in that class. 3, read all the readings. All the readings that your professor gives you, they give you for a reason to help you better understand concepts that you're going over in the class. Please go ahead and read them. Take notes. Take notes if it's face-to-face. Take notes if it's online. Take notes to help you better understand things. Make sure that you figure out if your class is test-based or project-based because the note-taking style is a little bit different. If it's test-based, you're going to need to take notes on everything. And you need to find out if that instructor bases a lot of their test questions on the notes. And if there are tests, you need good study habits. You got to know what type of person you are. Like, are you the person that can really actually do well by just studying the night before? My wife is one of them. It drives me nuts. She can do just as well as me. I'll study for a week and a half and she'll do just as well as me by studying the night before. But I don't think that's normal. I've had students like that, but it's not the norm. The normal student was me who needed to study for about 5 days beforehand, probably every night. And you got to practice strategies like think alouds and other things that can help you memorize, help you build concepts, form concepts in your head so that you understand the content so that you can talk about it or take a multiple choice test or whatever it happens to be. Make sure you're active in class, whether that's online or face-to-face. Ask questions in that discussion board. You're trying to get that instructor to recognize you. You're also trying to figure out things that you don't know and get answers to those questions. Make sure you talk to other students in the class to gauge the course so that you can all make sure that you're kind of, in some ways, working together to ensure that you're not missing any key points. I did a lot of studying with groups and things like that, and it was worthwhile every once in a while. It wouldn't be the only way I'd study, but it'd just be one way that I might study with someone to make sure, hey, I'm not missing any key stuff that you have that I don't, right? Visit the professor during office hours. Make sure they get to know you. That, as I said, the face, name, make sure you get to know your professors. It really does make a difference in your college success. And finally, give the professors something before you take the test. Before you submit a project, give them it and say, what can I do to improve this? If it's a test, go on and say, I just wanted some help, or I just have some questions around this, or can you give me any hints for the test? They will give you stuff. So please go in. No students use those office hours, utilize them, or just set up a meeting with your professor. I can't tell you how rare that is, and when it does, how much of a difference it makes for those students. All right, so those are my tips for doing well in college. If you have any more tips, please let me know in the comments. I'm really here to help y'all do good and be better students. And if I can offer any advice or any more advice to help you do that, please let me know. Later, everybody.